I'm Roger Hall. I'm 66 years of age, and for 53 years of my life I'll be making surfboards. I made my first surfboard when I was 13 years old, and that was in 1971, and I've been doing it ever since.
What would be your favourite boards that you make?
I'm a bit of a surfboard nerd, I suppose you'd say. I've always had this kind of visualisation that surfboards can be, many different shapes. And that's the nature of surfing, is that there's lots of different kinds of waves, there's different kinds of surfing, there's different people doing the surfing, and so one size just doesn't fit all. So I've always had this very kind of global view of lots of different surfboard designs. So it's a hard question to answer. I have been known to quote that if I was stuck on a desert island, my board of choice would be a twin keel fish. So I've really got a sweet spot in my heart for fishes, but I like longboarding as well. But recently, in the last 15 years, I've been riding hot cool influence boards, and so that's really my thing. My personal evolution now is completely 100% finless hot cool board.
How long have you had other people in the workshop with you?
The first person that came along to help me was Colin Ungovich, and we were school buddies. He turned up one weekend. This is in the early 70s, and basically announced that he had arrived to help me make boards. It's probably all I could talk about at school. So he got sucked into the vortex, and we sort of thought, oh well, what can Colin do? Roger's shaping and doing this and doing that, and Colin immediately became the sander, the polisher, the fin maker, and we worked together for roughly 30 years, I suppose, making surfboards. And after a while, we started to employ other people. It built up a little workforce, and some of those people that Colin taught how to do all those various tasks on a surfboard have become the workforce over the years that I've always relied on to make my boards.
Who else have you got working in the workshop on a regular basis?
So I'm in the factory here. We built the factory in 1983, and it was the Surfline factory until about 5 years ago, and then Hayden Chamberlain, HC Surfboards, moved in, and he occupies half the factory. I've got the other half of the factory, and the crew that work for me, which is Reson and Bryce Barton, they work for Hayden now. So I use my half of the factory to make my stringers, glue up my blanks, make my tail blocks, shape my boards, and then they have the other half of the factory to do all the colours, the glassing and the finish.
You've had a bit of a change in the past years with the CNC machine purchase. How's that changed everything for you, and what do you do in that side of things nowadays?
I'd long held a dream to have a CNC machine, right back in the 80s, and my father actually started to make me one, but unfortunately he passed away before we could complete the project. So I've always had it in my mind to mechanise the process, and about 14 years ago I commissioned a custom ordered CNC 3-axis CNC machine to be made, and that's been a life changer for me. I was spending every Friday afternoon at the physio trying to sort out my back and my hands and all parts of my body that were breaking down from making surfboards, and I don't go to the physio anymore. And the main thing about the shaper machine is that it's a design tool, but it helps me out as well by doing all the donkey work. It's very efficient, it's very precise, and your ability to design an experiment is immediately at your fingertips. I kind of ended up developing my own way of thinking about and going about making surfboards. And the way I like to do it is I like to glue up every blank for every board I make. So I make the stringer, and the way I do that is I shape the board in Shape 3D design program, and out of that program I export the stringer profile of the board into another program, and I fiddle around with it. I add 8mm extra tolerance, shaping tolerance, and the little tab on the nose, and then I send that to a CNC machine and cut it out. And I like to do that because I always start my design process off with the bottom rocker. I always start any surfboard with the bottom rocker. The bottom rocker is like the known quantity. I can completely visualize that. And then, so what you're seeing there is that is the bottom rocker of, in this case, Luca's new custom 9458 Special. And off that bottom curve, the whole surfboard's built off it. So the thickness foils measured off that rocker curve. So then you've got your deck line, and that's the deck line of the finished board basically. You might get a mil or two skimmed off it, but that's pretty much what Luca's going to be standing on. And then your bottom contours feed in and out of that rocker curve as well. And your plane shapes measured off it, off that stringer. So that's a very crucial part of the design process, and that kind of gets the board started in my mind. So then, once I've got that, I then go and find a blank that'll fit in. So I'm always looking for the closest possible tolerance, because once that blank is glued up to the deck curve on the stringer profile, all we have to do is take the slightest cut off, just basically peel the crust off that, and you're going to have all the nice hard foam still intact. So it's a design process, but it's also has a lot to do with the durability of the surfboard, and it's a visual thing. Like in this case, we've got a 3/4 inch wide stringer because it's a log, like put a big beefy stringer in. But you can do lots of different things with stringers. It's like an artistic, creative part of building surfboard. So that appeals to me too. So I've got lots more stringers over here that I've cut for people. It's just a bit of foam. We'll put that over the back. This is going to be a double stringered board, 10 foot for mat. It's going to have a foam insert in between those stringers. So these stringers are made up out of cedar and pine, so there's two different coloured woods. And so you'll see there's different coloured woods here. So this is redwood. So I'm making some 9-band stringers for a couple of people. So there'll be alternating layers of different colours of wood making up the stringer. You'll see this one here is two thin, pale outside timbers and then a dark timber in the middle. There's all sorts of different aesthetics that you can get. So that's another reason why I like to actually be in charge of the whole glue-up process, stringer making glue-up process. Some of the stringer wood here. This is poplar, which I've been using a lot over the last quite a few years. With the longboards, I like to build tail blocks for them. It's just like a little artistic feature. It's almost like part of my personality. I've been doing it for so long. And I do that in that room there. So normally in this room I'm making tail blocks, but I'm in the middle of doing a run of glue-ups. So I've split a number of blanks and I'm going through them finding which stringer matches which blank. So I've got split blank halves everywhere, but normally in here I'm making tail blocks. So it's a lot of fun playing around with different colours of timber, different grains, and it's a nice durable aspect to have on the tail of your board, but it's also adds a little signature piece. I pretty much like to make them all a little bit different for people. So for the last 14, almost 15 years, I've been making all my boards with a custom-built CNC shaping machine, and a big part of that process is the software. So designing surfboards actually here on the screen. It's a great way to visualise, which is my thing. I like to visualise surfboards. You can see exactly what they're going to look like, and you can see them three-dimensionally. So you'll see that red line, that's the cross-sectional slice through that board, at that part of the board. So you can see it's got a little bit of a V bottom. Through the centre, it's a light roll, and then up here, it's concaved. So it's actually showing the bottom contours of the board. This one's a 7.6 flow model that I'm custom mainly for Bond, and that's the last board that I cut on the machine, which was yesterday evening. I cut that, and that's the next board I'll be shaping. So this is the 7.6 flow for Bond that I was just referring to. This is it straight off the machine. And it's a file I've used quite a bit. It's a lovely little board, had great feedback on it. And Bond's talked to Tony Baker. Tony's got one. So they've had a good chinwag about the board and how it goes. So he felt very comfortable to order this one here. And what I was showing you in there on the screen was the concave, transitioning into the roll. That roll, which then transitions into more of a flat V panel. And right off the tail, it's pretty much flat. So from here, what my job is basically is to redefine the tail and the nose and shape the rail of the board, complete the shape of the rail. And then it's really just going over the whole thing and taking out these machine marks. The board is pretty much already shaped. But I'll spend an hour or so, hour and a half on it, just fussing with it, getting it exactly how I want it. Interacting with the stringer and the foam. Whenever you're sanding foam, that hard stringer is going to rise up, so there's a little bit of extra work with my big stringers. And then I spend quite a bit of time after the shape measuring the board. I still keep my sort of traditional paper copy with all of my measurements on it. I've got the digital file, and then I've got that hand recorded record of the shape as well. There's quite a few places that I measure the board. I'll probably spend about 20 minutes measuring the board, writing down all the details of it.
It's a nice board, that one.
Yeah.
It's quite similar to my 8.6 pintail sort of egg that I've got.
Yeah.
That's my go-to for everything, really.
Yeah, well, this is a shape that translates up and down. I've done 5.11s, right up to 10 footers off this.
Yeah.
Just a good all-rounder. Quite performance off the tail. But you ride it in the middle, really nice trimming board, cheeky hang 5.
What sort of fin setup does this one have?
You actually put a 9-inch, like a George Greno type of template, just as a single fin. But I sometimes put side bites in them, drop the size of the fin down a bit. They go really well as twin keels. Because, back in the early 80s, I made a lot of boards like this. And a lot of those were twin fins and twin keels. So this is the Mickey 3000 3-axis CNC machine that I use to shape my boards. There's still a hand finishing component, so I'm still hand shaping them. But after I've designed the board with the software program and the blank's been glued up to that design, then the board will cut it exactly to that design. It's very precise. It's efficient. While it's working, I go away and do something else. It does a wonderful job. And The real strength of it, it's nice that it does that donkey work, but the real strength of it is as a design tool. Potentially, and quite often, every board we make is different to the previous one. We do a lot of experimental boards with the machine. It's as I say, it's really the strength as a design tool. Not much happening here today, unfortunately, but this is a room where Reese does all the custom sprays. An infinite array of options as far as your custom surfboard colours go. And we'll go down the glassing bay shortly, but this is where all the sanding happens. Once the board's been fiberglassed, it's sanded smooth. This is the other shaping bay in the factory, and this is where Hayden whips up his magic shapes. So here's an interesting little board. It's ready to be sanded. It's been fiberglassed, but what's interesting about it is the shape. It's asymmetric. It's basically a twin keel fish on the forehand rail and a speed dialer template, so double wing swallow on the backhand side. So you can see it'll have a twin keel on that side, on the forehand side, and a speed dialer quad setup on the backhand. Surfers don't surf symmetrically, we surf asymmetrically, so why should a surfboard be symmetrical? Food for thought. This is the glassing bay, that's where Bryce works. There's a few different shapers boards in here at the moment. This is BC, Brian Clark, the Californian shaper who's been living in New Zealand and Plymouth for quite a few years. He comes up, shapes a few boards here, so we finish them off for him. That's one of mine over there, 7.4 Tomcat model. I think there's a mix of Hayden's and BC shapes, and a couple of my shapes up here. 58 specials. This one's going to have a resin tin. We've got the colour swatches out here for mixing up the colours. That one's had a spray, but it's also having some other artwork added into it at the laminating stage. So this is a board I shaped back in the early 80s. There's quite a bit going on with it. But what you need to understand is that in the early 80s, there weren't any longboard blanks in New Zealand at all. So you couldn't make longboards. Well, then windsurfing came along, so suddenly there were big pieces of foam being blown. And I made a couple of longboards out of the windsurfer blanks, but they were very thick, and it meant mowing a lot of foam off. So much foam, it was just ridiculous, really. So I talked to people at the blank factory into letting me go down and make a false bottom in one of their windsurfer molds to reduce the thickness, take some of the thickness out. And I went down there one day and made this inlay to put in the bottom of the mould. Got chased all around the factory because I made a mess everywhere I went, and people were very unhappy with me. And anyway, I got the job done, and we spent the day blowing these longboard blanks. And I pretty much got run out of the factory by the end of the day because the foam blower had so much trouble getting the formula right for these relatively thin, wide blanks that because he got paid, X amount for a first, X amount for a second, and probably nothing for a reject, and we had a sort of a mixed success rate of pouring blanks that day. So he went home and didn't really have much money to show for his day's work. So I wasn't allowed to come back. But I did drive away from there that day with a ute full of longboard blanks. So they were kind of like the first longboard blanks in the modern era. And this board was shaped out of one of those blanks. So it kind of means quite a lot to me because of that story. But also, and this is my own board, you can see I was thinking a lot about design elements and trying to see what I could do with a longboard. With a longboard format, you're sort of talking about mixing performance surfing and traditional surfing in one board. So I was playing around with having a fair amount of say like more nose rocker than what you'd have in a log, but then tricking the water flow into giving you that nice trimming up in the nose. There's a concave in here, and then there's these channels cutting through. It's concave through the template here, and then in the tail end we've got four channels, speeding up the water and loosening things up. We've also got these hooked rails in here, concave rails, and a quad fin setup on an area pintail. And the board went really well actually, and somewhere along the line I sold it off because I wanted to make another one, experiment in another direction, but somehow over the years it's found its way back to me. So it's a bit beat up now, and it's not watertight, but it would be kind of cool to get it all watertight and take it for a surf, just to sort of see where my thinking was at 40 sort of years ago, and to see how it kind of translates to what I like to feel under my feet now.
What year was it this was made?
Probably about around about the time we built the factory, so probably around about 83. So I was in the team Surfline. It's my own team rider, wave walker, because when you ride a longboard, you're riding the wave and the board, you're walking the board. High performance, fun machines, and I think that's a key phrase when you go surfing, especially around here at Bream Bay. It's about having fun more often than not.
Very cool. Someone let you make some out of them windsurf board molds.
Oh, they weren't very happy with me.
Yeah.
The windsurfing fraternity, they were quite sort of off class, and we were quite looked down on, especially me coming from the country. And I was probably pretty lucky that they actually gave me a go to let me do it. But they didn't really, they were in it's a production line, and so me trying to fit into that didn't really work very well. The first place they put me was up in the sail loft, and the sail loft guy, he didn't come in early. So I'm up there and I'm halfway through my project, and there's dust flying everywhere. And in arrives the sailmaker, and not at all impressed, not happy at all to have somebody, making a mess up in his nice sail loft, which I suppose is understandable. So I got chased out of there, and I eventually ended up in the showroom, which had this plush blue shag pole carpet, and by the time I finished it had red clay gel dust all through it. So kind of got chased out of that factory by the end of the day.
What's the idea with the channels on the front?
So we're just looking to enhance the water flow through here, basically speed up the trimming of the board. When you're on the nose, you want the nose to be slipping through the water really fast, and you want to be dragging the rest of the board back in the hook of the wave. So it's all about making this part of the board as efficient as possible. I think if I had to pick one single highlight of my career, it would be being on Bob McTavish's shortlist for surfboard designers that he admires. And Bob's got a way of putting it in that he sort of sees that there's thousands and thousands probably of shapers in the world, but in his eyes there's very few true designers. So to be on his shortlist of designers worldwide, that would have to be the highlight of my career, just to get that recognition from Bob. But when I think back, if I go back 45 years, my father showed me how to scribe the rocker curve off a surfboard onto a piece of wood that then sort of became a measuring stick, That was a highlight, because that set me on a course of
developing methods and record keeping that's really helped me get, you know, to where I am. And then maybe 10 years after that, I started using a profiler, and that really kind of took a lot of that stuff and made it happen more instantaneously. So instead of standing there with a electric planer, suddenly you're putting the rocker curve into the board, you're foiling the blank, you're hitting the node with this profiling tool just so much quicker and so accurately. And so then you can kind of riff on the top of that with what you're doing with your contours and etc. And then 15 years ago, it was a real highlight to be able to order a custom-made CNC shaping machine from kind of the godfather of shaping machines worldwide, I would say, Mickey Langenbach. And he took a particular interest in it when he saw the sort of boards that I was trying to make. And so he came up with something that was very cool. And he said to me, actually, as he was building the machine, and I'd go over there and he'd show me how far he'd got, etc., onto the Gold Coast. One day he looked back at me and he says, "And Roger, this will take you from being a shaper and turn you into a designer." And I think that's exactly the path that's led me to what Bob McTavish was able to see in me. That having that shaping machine it's taken me off the planer, and it's just allowed me to basically, I feel like a radio beacon sort of thing of ideas. There's just this free flow of ideas, and it's done exactly that. It's turned me into a designer. And so, you know, that's been the journey up until now. And going forward, I'm kind of, you know, getting a bit longer in the tooth. I like to say I'm semi-retired. And it's all about surfing a lot more with an R&D slant to it. A lot more time in the water on my hot curls. That's a real passion for me. So I want to see how far I can get with developing that. And any other experimental boards, really. I really like doing, you know, things for people that are going to enhance their surfing journey. And that's kind of the culmination of all of it, really, is how to put the biggest, widest smile on people's faces. That's what I live for.